Hi, I'm Tony Verhoeven, technical trainer for Polaris Industries. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to install this front bumper on an 850 XCR. Before you begin the install, it's important to check and make sure you have all of your parts and all of your tools. Please retain the installation instructions for future reference in parts ordering. So before we begin the installation, you're going to want to make sure that the engine and the exhaust system has had time to cool. We are removing the exhaust system from the machine to install this bumper. So I'm going to go ahead and let the machine cool down. Once the machine is cool, I'll remove the two side panels as well as the hood. And when removing the hood on the right-hand side of the vehicle, there is going to be a chassis harness to hood harness connection. So we'll need to go ahead and disconnect that before the hood will come off. Then the hood slides forward and away. Next, we're going to remove the spare belt holder. So we'll go ahead and take the spark plug tool, turn it 90 degrees, and remove it. And then pulling up from the bottom, the spare belt holder will come out. Next, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the exhaust temperature sensor. We're only disconnecting the sensor that's in the tuned pipe itself. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the zip tie. And then there's a white connector. And we'll disconnect him. And now we're ready to remove the exhaust pipe. To remove the tuned pipe, we're going to remove the two exhaust springs on the rearward side, one in the center, and three connecting the header pipe. I'm going to use a spring pulling tool for this, and I'm going to make sure that when I'm pulling the springs, I'm not prying against any other exhaust components. So I've removed all but one spring from the tuned pipe assembly. There's one spring that connects the header to the tuned pipe assembly that's on the lower side that's easier accessed with the silencer removed. So to remove the silencer, there's just two more springs. So I'll go ahead and pull those out. The second spring is back by the brake rotor. And with the springs removed, there's two zip ties that I'll need to clip so I can disconnect the EGT sensor. So I'll cut those, being careful not to cut any of the wires. And with those removed, there's a single connection for the EGT sensor. Once it's all disconnected and your springs are removed, the silencer should be free from the unit. So we'll pull upwards and it twists out of the chassis. And now we'll be able to go in and get access to that lower spring. With the silencer removed, I'll go ahead and take the tuned pipe out of the machine. Just be careful when you're taking it out. Watch your electrical connectors. You may have to turn the handlebars to get the steering post out of the way. It's also important to keep track of the exhaust donuts. Make sure that they don't fall into the bottom of the chassis. So I have the header pipe and the tuned pipe to the silencer connection here, and I'll set those aside for reassembly. Next, we're going to remove the two 10mm fasteners holding the bumper to the overstructure. And we're going to discard the two nylock nuts, but we're going to save the spring retainer as well as the bolt for installation. On the other side, we have a ground strap connected to that 10mm bolt. We're just going to note the orientation that's on the inside of the machine. So we'll go ahead and take that off, discard the nylock nut, and save the bolt for installation. Next step is to remove the two T40 Torx fasteners. And once these are removed, we'll go ahead and discard these. There's new ones that come in the install kit. So next we'll remove the upper and lower bumper support fasteners. We'll discard the nylock nut and retain the bolt for installation. And once that bolt is removed, the bumper should be free, so we can go ahead and remove that. And then we'll gain access to the lower bumper support bolt and remove that. The lower bumper support bolt can be accessed forward of the A-arms. For the purposes of filming, I'm going to remove this block-off plate so we can see the bolt. You do not need to do this. You can access it without removing this plate. And we'll go ahead and remove that nut and bolt. And we'll discard the nylock nut and retain the bolt for installation. The bumper support bracket that comes stock on this machine will not be used for the new bumper install, but I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this in case we want to go back to the original bumper. So next we're going to drill the 1/4-inch hole to receive the bolt for the bumper mount. For the purposes of this video, I've gone ahead and leaned the machine on the side. You do not need to do this. We just need to drill out the hole in the belly pan. There's a little dimple that shows you where to start drilling, and I'll just take my 1/4-inch drill and put the hole through. We're going to want to make sure that the hole is deburred and there's no extra plastic, that way our bolt will go through easily. It's important to note, if you're installing a bumper, you're going to want to install your skid plate first if you're putting that option on. If you don't have a skid plate, you can just go ahead and drill the hole. Next, we're going to take our new bumper and loosely install it onto the machine. You'll note our machine has a skid plate, so we're going to put the bumper in between the skid plate and the belly pan. So we'll just set that in there, and then we'll make sure the tabs up top go onto the overstructure, and then we'll move on to bolting the bumper together. So the next step is to go ahead and install the bumper support bracket. You'll notice that on the bumper support bracket there's a short side and a long side. The long side is going to face the front of the vehicle, and the hole should line up with the hole we drilled in the belly pan. So I'll go ahead and set that in there. I'll install the bolts with the new nylock nuts provided in the kit, and we'll just loosely assemble this until we get all the fasteners in. Next we'll move to the rear bumper bolts, and remember we have the spring retainer that needs to go back on the right hand side. So I'll get that into position. And the left-hand side, we have the ground strap that needs to be reconnected. The ground strap goes on the inside. And we'll go ahead and loosely install our new nylock nuts that are provided in the kit. Provided in the kit, there'll be 3 T40 Torx fasteners. 2 of those fasteners will replace the ones we discarded when disassembling. So I'll get those loosely started. And the 3rd fastener is going to come up through the hole that we drilled in the belly pan and into the bumper support bracket. Once we have all the bolts loosely installed, we'll go back and torque them all to specification. With the fasteners torqued, I'm going to go back and install my block-off panel. If you did remove this, you're going to need to put it back in. We'll go ahead and slide that down into place and make sure all the tabs are engaged with the belly pan. And then we'll proceed to installing the exhaust system. So the first step to installing the exhaust is going to be to get the donut placed onto the head pipe. So I'll go ahead, inspect the donut, make sure there's no abnormal wear or pieces missing. And we'll place that onto the head pipe. There is 2 orientation marks that'll make sure it goes on properly. And we'll just make sure that's fully seated up against the flange on the head pipe. With that installed, we can proceed with our tune pipe assembly. Make sure that we have our EGT connector out and accessible. With the tune pipe set into place, I'm going to go ahead and get one spring installed to hold it in position while I fit up the other exhaust components. It's important to note there's two different types of exhaust spring. One of them is going to be a shiny brass material, and the other has a dull gray look to it. The dull ones are for the head pipe, and the shiny brass spring is for all other connections. Before we install the silencer, I'm going to go ahead and install the 3 head pipe springs. It's easier accessed through the hole where the silencer sits, so I'll go ahead and get those put on. So after we have the tune pipe installed and the header springs on, I'm going to go ahead and install the silencer. Again, we're going to inspect the exhaust donut, make sure there's no cracking or flaking or any issues there. I'll loosely install that onto the tune pipe. There's a rubber isolator that's going to go on the lower frame portion. You can see there's a notch cut out of this to fit over the Torx fastener. So I'll put that into position. And I'll take my silencer, making sure that the exhaust outlet goes into the hole in the belly pan. I'm going to roll the silencer into position, making sure that it goes down onto that rubber isolator. And the 2 pipes come together. And once it's all loosely fit into place, we'll reinstall all the springs. It is important to note that there's one long brass colored spring, and that one's going to go down by the brake rotor. With all the exhaust springs installed, I'm going to go back and make sure both of my exhaust connections are seated. There's no extra gaps and nothing's pulled apart. Make sure that the silencer is sitting on the isolator brackets and locked into position. If that all checks out, we'll go ahead and reconnect our 2 EGT sensors. So I'll clip this into place. And then in the same position that these were fastened before, I'm going to reinstall the zip ties. It's important to note that we do not want this wire to be pulling, so make sure there's some slack in there and this is not pulling. Then we'll put one more zip tie up top to hold up the excess wire in the connection. Next, we'll connect the tune pipe EGT sensor. And we'll take the excess wiring and zip tie it up in the same fashion as it was when we disassembled. Again, with this sensor, we want to make sure that we're not pulling any wires too tight and that there's plenty of slack in the harness, but it's zip tied up out of the way so it can't come in contact with any other components under the hood. Reinstall the belt holder. We'll clip into position. And we'll put our spark plug tool and turn it 90 degrees. Reinstall the hood, ensuring that the front of the hood clips into location. And then we have one connection to make from the chassis harness to the hood harness. 2 quarter turn fasteners. And we're ready to put our side panels on. We'll do the 2 quarter turn fasteners on the side panel and the rubber bungee.